Deep within the Arctic ice, a discovery is rewriting human history. This video explores the polar archaeological site, suggesting occupation during unexpected ancient climates, a find that shatters our core assumptions about the past. By the end, you will understand how a single remote location forces us to rethink the limits of human survival and the story of our species. We will uncover how people not only reached but thrived in a frozen world during a time science said was impossible, and what their forgotten tools and homes reveal about a climate that does not match our models. What does it truly mean to be resilient in a world of constant change? The crunch of ice underfoot was the only sound for miles. On a desolate Arctic ridge, a member of the research team knelt to examine a dark, angular shape jutting from the thawing ground. It was not a rock, brushing away a layer of grit and ice. The outline of a carefully crafted stone blade came into view, its edge still sharp after millennia. Just a few feet away, the distinct charcoal black stain of an ancient hearth emerged from the permafrost, a silent testament to a fire that once burned against the endless cold. The initial reaction was not celebration, but profound disbelief. In a landscape this severe, this remote, the immediate assumption was of a recent camp, perhaps from a few centuries ago. But as the team meticulously excavated, cataloging more tools and the faint outlines of what might have been shelter posts, a staggering truth began to dawn. These artifacts possessed a style and a level of weathering that spoke of deep antiquity. Millennia. During these interludes, average temperatures would rise several degrees, summer sea ice would retreat from coastlines, and the tundra landscape would transform. Grasses and shrubs would spread, supporting herds of animals like mammoths, reindeer, and woolly rhinoceros. What was a barren margin became, briefly, a habitable corridor. We know this not from guesswork, but from the meticulous science of paleoclimatology. Scientists drill deep into ice sheets, extracting long cores that act as a frozen timeline. Each layer of snowfall, compacted over the ages, contains tiny bubbles of ancient atmosphere and chemical signatures that record the temperature of the year it fell. Similarly, sediment layers on lake and ocean floors accumulate pollen, plant matter, and microorganisms that thrive under specific conditions. Together, these natural records paint a picture of a climate that pulsed and shifted, with warm peaks and cold troughs creating a rhythm of opportunity and hardship. These fluctuations were not gentle background noise. For the people of the deep past, a warming phase of a few centuries could open entire new worlds. Coastlines freed from ice became rich hunting grounds for marine mammals. Inland valleys, once locked in permafrost, sprouted with vegetation that attracted massive herds. A temporary corridor of milder weather could make a journey of hundreds of miles northward not just possible, but strategically advantageous, away from competition and into lands brimming with resources. The site we are exploring did not exist in a perpetual winter. It was likely occupied during one of these precious, unexpected windows, a time when the Arctic was not a dead end, but a frontier. This climatic nuance is the essential backdrop, the shifting stage upon which a remarkable human story was about to unfold. These temporary corridors of milder weather solve the puzzle of how they got there, but they raise an even more profound question. Who were these people? The silent stones and charcoal stains offer no names, no language, no stories passed down. They are a ghost signature in the archaeological record, and their identity is the first great mystery of this polar site. Were they a known culture from the south, perhaps a familiar group of mammoth hunters who simply pushed their luck and their territory further north than we ever dreamed possible? Or does this site represent something far more startling, the remnants of a completely unknown group, a society uniquely adapted over generations to the rhythms of the high latitudes. To find clues, archaeologists become detectives of the deepest past, examining three key lines of evidence. The first and most abundant is the toolkit itself. The shape of a spear point, the method of flaking a blade, the design of a scraping tool, these are like cultural fingerprints. Researchers meticulously compare the artifacts from the polar site to those from well-documented cultures, hundreds or even thousands of miles to the south in Siberia, or potentially eastward toward North America. A close match might trace a migratory path, a trail of technological breadcrumbs leading back to a known homeland. A unique style, however, suggests isolation and independent innovation, the hallmark of a people carving out their own way of life in a world apart. The second line of evidence is far more fragile and rare, but exponentially more powerful: organic material. In the preserving cold of the permafrost, there is always the hope, however slim, of finding something more than stone. A fragment of worked bone, a strand of hair, even a microscopic residue of DNA on a tool handle. Such a find could offer a genetic whisper, a direct biological link that might connect these polar pioneers to populations across Asia or the Americas, or reveal them as a distinct lineage lost to time. The third clue lies in the realm of symbolism. Did these people create art? Did they carry personal ornaments, beads of ivory or pendants of animal teeth? Such objects transcend pure utility. They speak to identity, to belief, to the human need to make meaning. A unique artistic style is a powerful declaration of a unique cultural self. As we piece together these fragments, we are forced to reflect on the fundamental drive they represent. What compels a community to pack their lives onto their backs and walk into the mouth of the freezing wind, generation after generation? It is more than just following herds. It is a testament to a boundless human curiosity, an irrepressible need to see what lies beyond the next ridge, even when that ridge is shrouded in ice fog. The scale of their journey is humbling, a slow, relentless expansion across a continent, drawn toward a horizon that promised both profound risk and the ultimate reward, a new home. Yet establishing who they were only deepens the next layer of the enigma. For a society to put down roots in such a place, even during a warm spell, they needed more than courage. They needed a blueprint for survival, a technological genius tailored for the edge of the world. Their identity remains a ghost in the stones, but their journey is a map we can begin to trace. Reaching that desolate ridge was not a single, desperate trek, but a multi-generational saga of adaptation, a slow unfurling of human presence across a shifting continent. To understand the pathways and possibilities, we must think like them, seeing the landscape not as a barren obstacle, but as a series of corridors that opened and closed with the ancient climate. One of the most compelling routes is the coastal corridor. During those warmer interludes, the relentless grip of sea ice would loosen. Vast stretches of Arctic shoreline, once locked in by impenetrable barriers, would become accessible. This was not a sandy beach holiday, but a highway of immense opportunity. These ice-free coasts were rich with life, seals, walrus, and migratory birds, offering a reliable, protein-rich bounty for people who mastered the skills to harvest it. Traveling by foot along these shores, or perhaps in simple boats crafted from animal skins, a community could move steadily northward, following the retreating ice and the life it revealed. Another pathway led inland, following the great river valleys that snake their way toward the Arctic Ocean. These river systems, like the Lena or the Yenisei in Siberia, acted as natural highways through the wilderness. Their floodplains, fertilized by seasonal melts, would have supported more abundant vegetation, which in turn attracted the massive herds that were the lifeblood of Paleolithic societies: mammoth, bison, and reindeer. A group could move with the herds, using the river as a guide and a source of fresh water, penetrating deep into the continent's heart before branching north. This was not a blind wander. It was a strategic, seasonal migration, a dance with the environment where knowledge of animal behavior and plant cycles was passed down like the most precious heirloom. The journey itself demanded a portable revolution in technology. We are not talking about a weekend camping trip, but a permanent expedition into a world that tolerated no mistakes. Their clothing had to be a masterpiece of insulation and craftsmanship, likely tailored skins from caribou or other animals, sewn with sinew thread in ways that trapped body heat and shed wind. Shelter was not a permanent cabin, but something that could be built quickly from local materials, perhaps frames of mammoth bone or wood covered with hides, creating a vital refuge from the biting cold. Their hunting techniques evolved into a high-stakes art form. Taking down a mammoth or a woolly rhinoceros required incredible coordination, specialized weaponry like heavy spears with stone points, and an intimate understanding of terrain to orchestrate ambushes or drives. Every tool in their kit, from the delicate needle to the brutal spear, was a direct answer to a question posed by the environment. How do we stay warm? How do we build a home in a day? How do we turn the mightiest creatures of the Ice Age into sustenance and shelter? This logistical puzzle transforms our view of these people. They were not just survivors, they were Arctic engineers, carrying a complete cultural and technological blueprint that allowed them to turn the most marginal lands into a home. This brilliant adaptation for movement, however, leads us to the next, more intimate mystery. Once they stopped, once they chose that specific ridge to light their hearths, what did daily life actually look like in this temporary haven at the top of the world? The hearth's charcoal was a clue, but the true testament to their genius lay in the ground itself. As archaeologists carefully peeled back the layers of turf and permafrost, the ghostly outline of a home emerged, a blueprint for survival etched into the earth. These were not simple tents or temporary windbreaks. The people of Sung here built semi-subterranean houses, sophisticated structures engineered to defy the Arctic cold. They began by digging a shallow pit into the stable ground, creating a foundational bowl that leveraged the Earth's own insulating properties. The framework above this pit was a testament to resourcefulness, likely constructed from whatever massive materials were at hand. In some Arctic sites, this meant the immense ribs and jawbones of whales, creating a skeletal arch that must have seemed both alien and magnificent. At inland locations, heavy timber or even the long, curved tusks and leg bones of mammoths could form the support. Over this robust frame, they would layer slabs of sod, animal hides, and perhaps even blocks of snow during the winter months, crafting a living shell that was seamlessly part of the landscape itself. The engineering principles at work were remarkably advanced. The entrance was often a long, tunnel-like passageway that dipped below the main living floor. This design, called a cold trap, allowed warmer air, which rises, to stay in the main chamber while the heavier cold air settled in the tunnel and drained away. The entire structure was often oval or rounded, presenting no sharp corners for the relentless wind to grip and tear at, effectively deflecting the gales that swept across the tundra. Inside, the space was undoubtedly centered around a central hearth, the heart of the home where heat, light, and social life converged. The thick earthen walls and insulating roof would turn this single fire into a sustainable source of warmth, trapping it through the long polar night. These were not solitary shelters either. The size of some dwellings suggests extended families or small communal groups lived together, sharing warmth, tasks, and stories in a space where social cohesion was as vital as physical insulation. When we compare these ancient blueprints to those of later Arctic cultures, fascinating patterns emerge. The classic Dorset culture houses, built thousands of years later, often used a similar semi-subterranean approach with axial stone slabs lining the entrance tunnel, showing a convergent evolution of the same brilliant idea. The Thule people, ancestors of modern Inuit, perfected the use of whale bone and stone in their winter houses, creating communal sleeping platforms and ingenious ventilation systems. The structures at Sung here share this foundational Arctic logic, proving that the essential principles of surviving extreme cold were discovered not once, but independently by different peoples across vast stretches of time. This tangible architecture transforms our understanding. It moves us from imagining nomadic hunters huddled around a fire to recognizing settled communities of Arctic engineers. They invested tremendous labor into building not just a camp, but a home designed to last seasons. This level of investment in a fixed location speaks volumes about their social organization and technical skill. It prompts a pivotal question: if they were putting down roots sturdy enough to build such houses, what were they building their lives upon? What economic foundation could possibly support a permanent community in such a seemingly barren land? A home of mammoth bones and sod is a marvel of engineering, but it is an empty shell without a reliable source of food. The true measure of these Arctic pioneers lies not just in their architecture, but in their pantry. How did they feed a community in a landscape where green things vanish for 9 months of the year? The answer is written in the bones, a scattered archive of their meals that reveals a strategy of breathtaking precision and deep ecological wisdom. When researchers sift through the soil at sites like Sung here, they look for more than tools. They search for faunal remains, the discarded and broken bones of the animals that sustained life. Each fragment tells a story. The dense, heavy bones of a walrus or seal point to mastery of coastal hunting, a venture onto the ice or into frigid waters. The lighter, more delicate bones of caribou or reindeer speak of inland pursuits, of tracking vast herds across the tundra. Bird bones from seasonal migrants like geese or ducks are markers of the fleeting Arctic summer, a brief window of abundance seized with nets or snares. And in some coastal sites, the colossal bones of whales suggest something even more extraordinary, a communal hunt of staggering ambition that could feed dozens for months. This was not random foraging. It was a calculated, seasonal dance with the environment, a calendar dictated by migration and thaw. Spring might focus on seals pupping on the ice. Summer would bring the great caribou migrations and flocks of birds. Autumn was a frantic time of preparation, hunting and processing as much as possible before the deep freeze returned. To survive the long winter, they needed more than luck. They needed a freezer, and they had one built into the very ground beneath their feet. The permafrost was their larder. Evidence suggests they dug deep caches into this permanently frozen layer, storing meat and fat from summer and autumn hunts. Wrapped in hides and buried, the food would freeze solid, preserved naturally against spoilage. This simple, brilliant technology of food storage transformed a seasonal bounty into year-round security. It allowed them to stay put, to invest in those substantial houses, because they were not constantly on the move in search of the next meal. We must also consider the short, intense burst of the Arctic summer, when the ground explodes in a carpet of hardy berries, lichens, and edible roots. While plant life would never form the core of their diet, it provided crucial vitamins, fibers, and variety. The knowledge of which plants were medicinal, which were nourishing, and which were poisonous was another layer of their intimate partnership with the land. This entire subsistence system paints a picture of a people who are not clinging to survival, but thriving through profound understanding. They saw patterns invisible to the untrained eye, the subtle signs of a seal's breathing hole, the predicted path of a caribou herd, the precise timing of a berry's ripening. Their world operated on a precarious boom and bust cycle, where a failed hunt or an unusually harsh season could tip the balance from security to hardship. This constant negotiation with fortune, this awareness of their dependence on the animals and the rhythms of the earth, inevitably shaped every other aspect of their existence. It influenced how they organized their labor, how they shared resources, and how they explained the mysteries of life and death in their frozen world. The stones tell us how they built, the bones tell us how they ate, but to understand who they truly were, we must listen for the echoes of their beliefs. The bones reveal a sophisticated economy, but the true genius of these people is held in their hands. Among the most telling finds at the polar site are not the grand structures, but the small, meticulously crafted objects of daily life, a frozen toolbox that speaks to a culture built on precision and foresight. One of the signature technologies is the microblade. These are not crude cutting tools, but tiny, razor-sharp slivers of stone, often no larger than a fingernail. They were mass-produced from a carefully prepared core, a single stone that could yield dozens of these uniform blades. The brilliance was in their use. They were not held in the hand, but slotted into grooves carved along the edge of a bone or antler point. This created a composite weapon, a spear or knife with a cutting edge far sharper and more durable than any single piece of stone could provide. If one microblade broke, it could be easily replaced, a modular system of repair and efficiency that speaks to a deep understanding of material science. For hunting on the ice or along the thawing coasts, they developed another critical innovation, the toggling harpoon head. Unlike a simple pointed spear, this was a complex piece of engineering, typically carved from ivory or bone. Its design was devastatingly effective. When thrust into a seal or small whale, the head would detach from the shaft but remain connected by a strong line. The unique shape of the head would then twist or toggle sideways inside the animal's body, making it impossible to pull out and ensuring the hunter could haul in their catch. This single tool represents a leap in hunting capability, allowing them to reliably harvest the rich resources of the Arctic seas. Survival here was also a battle against the cold, and their clothing was their first line of defense. To create garments that were both insulating and windproof, they needed fine, durable sewing. This is where the humble needle becomes a monument to ingenuity. Archaeologists have found needles carved from bird bone, polished to a smooth finish, with an eye so small it was likely threaded with sinew. The existence of such a delicate tool implies the creation of tailored, form-fitting clothing, with seams tight enough to block the wind, a technological advance as vital as any weapon. And when the long polar night descended, they fought the darkness with light and warmth from an elegant source, the fat burning lamp. These were shallow, bowl-like vessels carved from soapstone or molded from clay. Animal fat or oil would be placed inside with a moss wick laid along the edge. Once lit, these lamps provided a steady, smokeless flame. They were far more than simple lights. They offered crucial heat for warming a dwelling, for drying clothes, and even for melting ice for drinking water. A single, well-tended lamp could transform a dark, freezing pit house into a habitable, social space. The raw materials themselves tell another story. Many tools were made from what was immediately available: local flint or chert for stone tools, the bones and antlers of the animals they hunted. But the presence of certain materials points to connections that stretch far beyond the horizon. A piece of obsidian, a volcanic glass that fractures to an edge sharper than surgical steel, might be found hundreds of miles from its nearest natural source. A rare shell from a distant coast or a distinctive type of stone not found locally suggests something profound. These items are evidence of trade networks, or at the very least, long-distance travel and communication. They hint at social connections, alliances, and the exchange of knowledge across vast distances. A person possessing an obsidian blade was not just holding a superior tool. They were holding a map of their relationships, a token from a world beyond their own frozen valley. This entire technological suite is a testament to a fundamental truth. In extreme environments, necessity is not just the mother of invention, it is the architect of culture. Every stitch sewn by a bone needle, Every microblade set into a spear, every flame coaxed from a fat lamp, was an act of creative problem-solving. This practical ingenuity did not exist in a vacuum. It flowed naturally into how they expressed their identity, their beliefs, and their understanding of the world around them. The same hands that carved a harpoon for survival were likely the hands that carved something beautiful, something meant not for the body but for the spirit. The same hands that carved a harpoon for survival also carved objects of startling beauty. Among the stone blades and bone needles at Sunghear, researchers uncovered something that stopped them in their tracks, a small, carefully shaped pendant of polished mammoth ivory. It was not a tool, it was art. This simple object opens a window into the sixth great mystery of this polar site, a glimpse of symbols in the snow that reveal a rich inner world far beyond mere survival. For these Arctic pioneers, life was a constant dialogue with overwhelming natural forces: the predatory bear, the life-giving caribou, the sun that vanished for months. It is no surprise that their spirituality was deeply woven into this reality. The artwork they left behind, though rare, speaks volumes. An engraved pendant might depict a stylized bear or a waterbird, possibly representing a protective spirit or a clan symbol. A figurine, even a crudely shaped one from soapstone or ivory, could be an attempt to capture the essence of a mythological being, a deity of the hunt or a master of the animals. Sometimes the symbolism is more subtle, etched directly onto a utilitarian object. A hunter might incise a series of marks onto his spear thrower, not for grip, but as a tally of successful hunts or a plea for future fortune, turning a weapon into a sacred object. In a world where the line between life and death was so thin, spiritual intermediaries likely held great importance. Individuals we might call shamans, those believed to traverse the spirit world, would have been central figures. They interpreted dreams, performed rituals to ensure a successful hunt, and guided the community through the profound mysteries of existence, from the aurora dancing in the sky to the passing of a loved one. These artistic and spiritual practices were not a leisure activity, they were a core technology for living. They provided explanation, comfort, and social cohesion. A shared belief in animal spirits reinforced respectful hunting practices. A common mythology gave meaning to hardship and celebrated abundance. This symbolic life reminds us with powerful clarity that their story is not one of grim endurance, but of a full and complex human experience. They wondered, they feared, they hoped, and they created meaning from the ice and stars. This deeply human dimension, this need to make sense of their world, connects inextricably to the final, haunting question their site poses. A culture this resilient, this adaptable, with such a profound connection to their environment, did not simply fade away without reason. Their vibrant spiritual world, so intimately tied to the rhythms of the land, would have been shaken to its core by the very forces that first drew them north, setting the stage for an ending as dramatic as their beginning. Their spiritual world was woven into the very fabric of their daily lives, but that fabric was made of people. To understand how they endured, we must look beyond the individual and into the seventh mystery, the structure of the community itself. How did they organize their society in such profound isolation? The clues are subtle, but they paint a compelling portrait of a social world built on kinship and interdependence. The layout of the dwellings themselves offers the first hint. At sites like Sunghear, researchers do not typically find a single, isolated house. Instead, they often find a small cluster of semi-subterranean homes, spaced a respectful distance apart but clearly connected. This pattern suggests family units or small kin groups living in close proximity, sharing resources and responsibilities. A central, communal activity area might be found between these dwellings, a place for shared tasks like tool making or processing a large hunt, indicating that while each household had its own hearth, the community was bound by collective work. The distribution of tools and debris tells another part of the story. In one area, you might find a concentration of microblade cores and flakes, the detritus of tool making. In another, a pile of bone fragments and specific cutting tools might mark a butchering site. This separation of activity areas points to a practical division of labor. While roles were likely fluid, some individuals may have specialized in fine tool production, others in hide preparation, and the most experienced in the complex strategies of hunting. This specialization is not a sign of hierarchy, but of efficient cooperation, where each person's skill contributed to the survival of all. In an environment with zero margin for error, social cohesion was the ultimate survival tool. Group size was likely small, perhaps a few dozen individuals at most. In such a setting, leadership probably emerged from experience and respect, not formal power. The best hunter, the most skilled toolmaker, or the wisest elder might guide decisions about when to move camp or how to distribute a windfall of food. Managing conflict in a group this small, with no possibility of simply leaving, required sophisticated social mechanisms, shared rituals, storytelling, and a deeply ingrained system of reciprocity would have been essential for maintaining harmony. Disputes had to be mediated, not fought. Resources had to be shared according to understood rules, for hoarding could doom the entire community. Their resilience, therefore, was not just technological or spiritual, it was profoundly social. It was rooted in the unbreakable bonds of kinship and mutual obligation, in the understanding that the individual's fate was inseparable from the group's. This tightly knit social fabric, woven over generations, was their greatest innovation. It allowed them to pool risk, share knowledge, and raise children in a world that demanded constant vigilance. This model of a close, cooperative society makes their ultimate fate not just an archaeological puzzle, but a deeply human story. For the bonds that held them together, the very source of their strength, would soon face a challenge from which no social cohesion could fully shield them, a shift in the ancient climate that would rewrite the rules of their world once more. That tightly knit community, bound by kinship and shared purpose, existed in a moment of time we can now pinpoint with astonishing precision. The eighth great mystery of this polar site is a chronological conundrum, a question of when. How do we take a scatter of stones and charcoal and assign it a calendar date from 30,000 years ago? The answer lies in a silent clock embedded within the artifacts and the Earth itself, a clock that ticks with the steady decay of radioactive atoms. The most trusted method is radiocarbon dating. Every living thing absorbs a tiny, consistent amount of a radioactive form of carbon from the atmosphere. When that organism dies, whether it is a tree, an animal, or a person, the absorption stops and the radioactive carbon begins to decay at a known, unchangeable rate. By measuring how much remains in a piece of charcoal from that ancient hearth or a fragment of caribou bone from a meal, scientists can calculate how many years have passed since that organism was alive. At the Sung-Here site, samples from the hearths and from tools made of bone returned a series of dates that initially seemed impossible to reconcile. They pointed to an occupation not during the height of a warm period, but squarely within a climatic phase that our models have long described as intensely cold and arid, a time when the polar front should have made the region uninhabitable. To confirm this shocking result, researchers turned to a second, independent method called luminescence dating. This technique measures a different kind of clock, one found in minerals like quartz or feldspar within the sediments surrounding the artifacts. These minerals naturally trap energy from background radiation in the soil over time. When they are exposed to sunlight or intense heat, that energy is released, resetting the clock to zero. When an ancient hearth is used or when tools are buried and shielded from light, the clock starts ticking again. In a lab, scientists can stimulate these sediment grains with light or heat, causing them to release their stored energy as a faint glow, a luminescence. The intensity of that glow reveals how long the grains have been buried since they were last exposed to sunlight or fire. The luminescence dates from the sediments sealing the occupation layer at Sung here converged powerfully with the radiocarbon dates, creating a robust chronological anchor. They all pointed to the same narrow window of time. Even more cutting-edge techniques are now adding finer detail. Scientists can analyze the ancient DNA of plants, animals, and microbes preserved in the permafrost, creating a biological snapshot of the environment at the exact moment the site was active. Together, these methods form a scientific triangulation, each line of evidence cross-checking the others. The margin of error for these dates is remarkably small, often within a few centuries for such ancient material. This is not a vague guess, it is a firm, scientifically defended timeline. Establishing this date is the anchor that holds the entire interpretation in place. It transforms the site from a curious anomaly into a direct challenge. The occupation did not happen during a convenient warm spell we already knew about. It happened when, according to all our best climate reconstructions, it simply should not have. This chronological conundrum does not just date a campsite, it dates a paradox, forcing a profound and uncomfortable reevaluation of what we thought we knew about the ancient climate, and more importantly, about the limits of human ingenuity in the face of it. The scientific dates are now anchored, but they have created a profound and unsettling rift. On one side of this divide lies the meticulous evidence from the archaeological site itself, a clear testament to human life. On the other side stands the vast, impersonal record of Earth's ancient climate, compiled from ice cores and ocean sediments. Placing these two records side by side reveals the ninth and perhaps most pivotal mystery, a direct collision between what humans did and what the climate supposedly was. Let us visualize the data. A graph reconstructed from Greenland ice cores for that specific period shows a line trending sharply downward, indicating plummeting temperatures and arid conditions. Another dataset from ocean floor sediments near the Arctic suggests a dramatic expansion of sea ice, pushing the productive coastline far to the south. According to these environmental archives, the region around Sung here should have been a frigid, resource-poor desert, a place where sustaining a human community was theoretically impossible. Yet the charcoal from their hearths is right there, dated to that very same cold snap. This is not a minor discrepancy. It is an intellectual clash at the highest level, forcing a fundamental question: which record do we trust and how can both be true? One compelling hypothesis is that our broad-brush climate models are incomplete. The ice cores give us a global or hemispheric average, a zoomed-out view of the planet's health. But climate is not uniform, it is full of microclimates and local exceptions. Imagine a deep valley sheltered by mountains, or a coastal shelf kept warmer by a peculiar current. These local refugia could have created pockets of habitability, like temporary oases in the glacial cold, that are simply too small to register in the planetary scale data. Our models might be missing the trees for the forest, failing to capture the specific, sheltered niches where life, including human life, could cling on. The other, equally profound possibility flips the script entirely. Perhaps the climate data is correct, and it was indeed bitterly cold. The resolution to the paradox then lies not in the environment, but in the people. This suggests their adaptive technologies and social strategies were so advanced that they effectively lowered the survival threshold. Their insulated clothing, their efficient fat-burning lamps, their cooperative hunting and food storage systems might have created a kind of portable microclimate, a bubble of human warmth and resourcefulness that allowed them to persist in conditions we assumed were lethal. They were not waiting for the climate to become suitable, they were making it suitable through sheer cultural ingenuity. This clash of records does more than deepen a single archaeological mystery. It fundamentally challenges our models of past human-climate interaction. revealing them as too simplistic. We have often viewed ancient peoples as passive passengers on Earth's climatic roller coaster, thriving in good times and retreating or facing hardship in bad times. The evidence from the polar site suggests a far more dynamic and empowered relationship. It portrays humans not just as reactors to climate, but as active agents who could, through innovation and profound local knowledge, expand the very definition of a habitable zone. This rethinking shifts the entire narrative of human resilience, setting the stage for the final, inevitable question that such a powerful story demands. If they were this resilient, this capable of defying the odds, then what could have possibly changed to bring their story in that place to an end? The charcoal and tools confirm they were here, but for how long? The 10th mystery asks whether this ridge was a temporary stopover or a place they called home for generations. The answer lies in the ground itself, in the subtle story told by layers of soil and stone. Archaeologists read this story through stratigraphy, the careful study of how one layer of occupation debris sits atop another. A single, thin band of charcoal and artifacts might represent a brief camp, a season or two of use. But at sites like Sungheir, the picture is often more complex. Researchers look for signs of rebuilding, for the faint, overlapping outlines of house floors that have been resurfaced or repaired. They search for post holes that have been dug, filled, and then dug again in a slightly different spot, indicating a structure was taken down and a new one erected in the same cherished location. These are not the marks of a passing visit. They are the fingerprints of renewal, of a community investing labor to maintain a specific place across decades or even centuries. Another powerful clue comes from what they threw away. A midden, an ancient garbage dump, is a treasure trove for understanding duration. A shallow scatter of bone fragments suggests a short stay. But a deep, stratified mound of discarded shells, animal bones, broken tools, and hearth ash tells a different story entirely. It represents the accumulated refuse of daily life over a very long time, layer upon layer of meals consumed and tools worn out. The composition of this midden can also reveal seasonal patterns. A layer rich in seal bones might indicate a winter occupation, while a layer full of bird bones points to a summer habitation. Finding both patterns repeated in sequence is strong evidence for year-round permanent settlement. Even the tools themselves whisper about time. A site used briefly might have tools that are largely finished and unbroken, brought in, used, and perhaps left behind. A permanent home, however, shows evidence of a full life cycle of technology. Here, archaeologists find not just finished spear points, but the rough cores they were struck from, the flakes discarded during their shaping, and the worn-out, broken tools that were carefully resharpened or repurposed. They find the delicate bone needles not just whole, but also broken and repaired. This evidence of maintenance and recycling speaks to a deep familiarity with place, where resources were managed thoughtfully because this was not a camp to be abandoned, but a home to be sustained. The distinction between a daring expedition and an established homeland is profound. It changes the emotional weight of the entire story. A seasonal camp is a story of bold exploration, of pushing boundaries. A permanent settlement is a story of putting down roots in the most unlikely soil, of building a cultural identity inextricably linked to that specific valley, that particular view of the mountains. It speaks of children born on that ridge, of elders passing knowledge there, of a mythology woven around local landmarks. This makes their ultimate fate not an anecdote about a failed journey, but a poignant mystery about the end of a world. What could unravel a society so resilient, so deeply attached to its home, that it had weathered countless storms and generations? The answer to how long they stayed deepens the shadow of why they left, pulling us toward the final, inevitable chapter of their story in the ice. The story of that single ridge is not an isolated miracle. It is a single, brilliant thread in a much larger tapestry of human ambition woven across the roof of the world. To truly grasp its significance, we must pull back and see the global pattern emerging from the ice. A pattern that suggests our ancestors' push into the polar realms was far more widespread and daring than we ever credited. Across the vast expanse of Siberia, for instance, sites on the remote Yamal Peninsula whisper of similar, ancient occupations. Here, researchers have uncovered evidence of people hunting mammoth and reindeer in landscapes that, according to climate models, should have been barren. These findings echo the same paradox: communities thriving in places our textbooks labeled as uninhabitable voids. Further east, the story continues. Traces of human presence on the ancient Bering Land Bridge, that now submerged corridor between continents, indicate that people were not just crossing this frigid plain in a hurried dash, but were likely living and adapting there for generations, using it as a sustainable homeland rather than just a passageway. The pattern even extends to the opposite end of the Earth. In the Canadian high Arctic, on islands like Ellesmere, tantalizing but fiercely debated evidence points to the possibility of human exploration during times of climatic opportunity, pushing the boundaries of the possible to almost unimaginable limits. When we place our featured site beside these other locations, both striking similarities and telling differences come into focus. The core technological toolkit is remarkably consistent: the microblades, the tailored clothing, the sophisticated hunting weapons. This speaks to a shared, brilliant cultural adaptation to cold that was developed and carried across immense distances. Yet, each site also holds unique signatures, slight variations in tool style or artistic expression that hint at distinct cultural identities forming in isolation. One group might have perfected walrus hunting while another became masters of inland caribou drives. This comparative view transforms our understanding. It moves us from celebrating a single, anomalous discovery to recognizing a previously hidden chapter in human prehistory, a broader pulse of exploration and settlement that coincided with those narrow climatic windows. It suggests that the peopling of the planet's most extreme environments was not a series of accidental, desperate arrivals, but a repeated, strategic expansion. Different groups, perhaps separated by thousands of years and miles, independently recognized the same fleeting opportunities and possessed the same profound ingenuity to seize them. This realization demands a global reassessment. Our maps of prehistoric migration, with their bold, sweeping arrows moving through temperate corridors, now require new, fainter lines branching northward into the pale white spaces, tracing the paths of those who looked at the ice and saw not a barrier but a frontier. If this pattern of polar settlement is real and widespread, it forces us to confront a haunting and inevitable question: what became of these resilient communities when their fleeting window of opportunity, whether measured in centuries or millennia, finally began to close? The frozen coast was not a barrier but a larder of unimaginable richness. While inland herds provided crucial resources, the true engine of survival and expansion for many polar communities was the sea itself. Their relationship with marine mammals went far beyond simple hunting. It was a comprehensive, life-sustaining partnership that fueled every aspect of their existence. The most obvious prize was meat, a dense protein source from animals like seals, walruses, and even small whales, but the true value was multidimensional. The thick layer of blubber on these animals was a treasure more precious than gold in the Arctic. Rendered into oil, it became the clean, burning fuel for their stone lamps, providing light and vital warmth through the endless winter nights. This wasn't just comfort, it was survival technology, enabling them to dry clothes, melt water, and maintain a habitable space inside their dwellings. The massive bones and ivory tusks of walruses and whales provided the raw materials for some of their most critical tools and structures. These strong, dense bones were ideal for crafting harpoon points, heavy-duty needles, and even the structural supports for their semi-subterranean homes, turning a successful hunt into the very architecture of their community. The hides were equally transformative. Carefully processed seal or walrus skin could be stitched together with sinew thread, using those delicate bone needles to create waterproof clothing and, most importantly, the covers for boats. This brings us to one of the most compelling indirect pieces of evidence at these sites: the technology of the hunt itself. The sophisticated toggling harpoon heads we discussed are not tools for land-based hunting. Their design is specifically for aquatic prey, to secure an animal in the water and prevent it from escaping. While it's theoretically possible to use such a weapon from stable ice or a shoreline, its efficiency increases exponentially when deployed from a stable platform on the water. This strongly implies, though direct evidence rarely survives, the use of some form of watercraft, likely skin boats known as umiaks or kayaks. These vessels would have been revolutionary, transforming the coastline from a linear obstacle into a dynamic highway. This maritime focus forces a dramatic rethink of the maps we draw for ancient human movement. Historians have long talked about an ice-free corridor, an inland passage between glaciers that allowed people to move. But for communities adapted to the sea, the most logical and resource-rich highway was the coast itself. During those warmer interludes, as the sea ice retreated, a navigable coastline would have stretched for thousands of miles, dotted with rookeries and rich feeding grounds. This coastal highway hypothesis suggests that some of the most significant human migrations might not have been trudging across barren tundra, but paddling along productive shorelines, moving steadily from one abundant bay to the next, generation after generation. They were not just surviving on the edge of the ice, they were mastering a marine world, using its bounty to build a complete culture from blubber, bone, and hide, and in doing so, charting a course into the unknown. Their mastery of the sea left a profound cultural legacy, but what of their biological legacy? The stones and bones tell a story of survival, but the most intimate connection to these ancient pioneers may be written in a code far smaller, within the very blueprint of life itself. This leads us to a quiet but revolutionary field of detective work, the search for genetic ghosts. Could traces of these polar explorers still echo in the DNA of people living in the Arctic today? To answer this, scientists turn to the rich genetic tapestry of modern indigenous populations across Siberia, Alaska, Canada, and Greenland. By carefully comparing the DNA of contemporary communities, researchers can identify unique genetic markers, distinct variations that have been passed down through countless generations. The hope is to find a set of these markers that is exceptionally ancient and geographically specific, a signature that could point back to a founding population from the distant past, perhaps even to the people who first weathered the glacial extremes. Finding such a signature would be a direct, living link, a thread of descent stretching back over 30,000 years. It would mean their story did not end on that frozen ridge, but continued, woven into the resilience of their descendants. The quest, however, is fraught with immense technical challenges. The preservation of ancient DNA is a fragile miracle. While the permafrost is a remarkable freezer, it is not perfect. Over millennia, the genetic material in bones and teeth breaks down into tiny, fragmented pieces. The process is accelerated by freeze-thaw cycles, microbial activity, and the simple, relentless passage of time. At many polar sites, what little organic material survives is often so degraded that extracting a readable genetic sequence is like trying to reconstruct a shredded, ancient manuscript from a handful of scattered letters. Contamination is another constant threat, as modern DNA from researchers or the environment can easily overwhelm these minuscule ancient samples, rendering them useless. Even when a sliver of ancient DNA is recovered, the interpretation is complex. A genetic match between an ancient individual and a modern population is not a simple parent-to-child story over such a vast gulf of time. It requires tracing population splits, mixtures, and migrations across hundreds of generations. The genetic landscape of the Arctic has been shaped and reshaped by multiple waves of movement over the last 10,000 years, from the ancestors of the Sami and Nenets in Siberia to the incredible Thule culture expansion that gave rise to the modern Inuit peoples. These later migrations were so successful and widespread that they may have genetically overshadowed earlier, smaller populations. This brings us to the poignant central question of this genetic search. Did the people of that ancient polar site leave no direct descendants, their unique genetic lineage vanishing completely when their community eventually dispersed or faced hardship? Or, in a more hopeful scenario, did a few survivors from that group blend with later arrivals, contributing a small but enduring thread to the genetic fabric of later Arctic peoples? Current research offers intriguing, if still incomplete, clues. Some studies of ancient DNA from more recent Arctic remains, dating to just a few thousand years ago, show a complex ancestry with deep roots in both Siberia and East Asia, but no clear, direct link to the much older Paleolithic populations like the one at Sungir. This suggests that while the cultural knowledge of surviving in the Arctic may have been passed down and reinvented, the specific people who first solved that puzzle may have been a separate branch on the human family tree, one that ultimately did not leave a clear genetic trace in the modern world. This possibility does not diminish their achievement, it reframes it. It means their story is one of profound innovation that did not require biological continuity to influence history. Their legacy may not be in our blood, but in the very idea of what is possible, a proof of concept written in ice and stone that later cultures would independently rediscover and perfect. Whether their genes survived or not, their human spirit, that drive to adapt and endure, became a permanent part of the Arctic story. Their genetic legacy may remain a whisper, but the silence of the site itself speaks with a different, more somber clarity. One day the hearth grew cold and was not relit. The tools were gathered up or simply left where they lay. The wind slowly filled the hollows of the houses with snow and silt. The question of why they left is as compelling as how they arrived, and the answer is likely not a single cataclysm, but a slow, cascading series of pressures that finally tipped the balance. The most intuitive culprit is the climate itself. Remember those unexpected ancient climates that first opened the door to the north? They were, by their nature, temporary. The Earth's climatic rhythms are a pendulum, and the warm interlude that made the region habitable would inevitably swing back toward colder, drier conditions. This wasn't necessarily a sudden ice age, but a gradual deterioration, a tightening vise. Summers might have grown shorter and cooler, reducing the plant life that supported the great herds. Winters could have become longer and more severe, with deeper snows that made hunting treacherous and travel between resource patches nearly impossible. The local microclimate that once sheltered their valley may have simply vanished, absorbed back into the regional deep freeze. Their brilliant adaptations had limits, and a sustained climatic shift could have pushed them beyond what even their portable microclimate of culture could withstand. Alongside a changing environment, the very success of their community could have sown the seeds of its own challenge. A stable, long-term settlement, by its nature, places consistent pressure on local resources. While they were masterful hunters, the key species they relied on, mammoths, woolly rhinoceros, or specific herds of reindeer, were not infinite. Over generations, even sustainable hunting could, when combined with a worsening climate, lead to a decline in these vital populations. If the mammoths moved on or grew too scarce, the loss was more than just meat. It was a primary source of bone for tools, ivory for art, and fat for fuel. A resource crash in such a marginal environment would have had devastating ripple effects, threatening the entire economic foundation they had built. We must also consider forces less visible in the archaeological record, the social and internal dynamics of the group itself. After generations in one place, even a small community can face internal strains, disputes over leadership or resources, or simply a longing for new horizons sparked by stories from travelers or traders. The decision to leave might not have been one of desperation, but of strategic choice. Perhaps scouts returned from the south with news of more stable climates, larger herds, or kin groups with whom they could ally. Abandonment in this light could have been a planned, gradual withdrawal, a community vote for a better future. They may have packed their most precious belongings, doused their final fires, and walked away together, following a new hope rather than fleeing a certain end. This exploration of their disappearance is a poignant reminder of the delicate equilibrium that sustains human life in marginal environments. Their story is not one of failure, but of a brilliant, long-running success that eventually met a changing world. It underscores that resilience is not a permanent state, but a continuous negotiation. Their departure left a silence on that Arctic ridge, but as we will see, that silence was not an ending. It was an interlude, a frozen pause that held its secrets until a world ready to listen finally began to ask the right questions. A discovery this profound inevitably sparks the imagination, leading to questions that venture far beyond the evidence. When we hear about ancient people thriving in impossible places, it is tempting to fill the gaps with grand, sweeping narratives, from tales of a lost advanced civilization to suggestions of otherworldly guidance. These ideas capture our wonder, but they do a profound disservice to the real, human story written in the ice. The truth is more remarkable than any fiction because it is about us. Let us separate the compelling facts from the distracting fringe theories with clarity and respect. First, the notion of a single, hyper-advanced global civilization that fell from grace is a persistent myth. Real archaeology reveals a different pattern, one of countless diverse cultures, each innovating in their own time and place, their knowledge often rising, fading, or being reinvented. The people at this polar site were not the decaying remnants of a forgotten technological age. They were pioneers at the peak of their own era's potential, their advanced tools and social strategies perfectly suited to their specific world. Their genius was in adaptation, not in lost physics or impossible machinery. Similarly, the idea that such achievements required extraterrestrial influence misunderstands the breathtaking scope of human ingenuity. It suggests our ancestors were incapable of the very problem-solving that defines our species. The evidence tells a different story. Every microblade, every bone needle, every engineered house is a testament to incremental innovation, to observation, trial and error, and knowledge passed from parent to child over generations. This was not technology bestowed from the stars, it was technology earned through perseverance on the ground. So how does rigorous science build its case against these captivating myths? It does so through a methodical, self-correcting process. The first pillar is context. An artifact alone is just an object. Its meaning comes from its relationship to everything else around it. A stone point found beside a hearth, inside a house outline, surrounded by the bones of a specific animal, tells a coherent story of domestic life and subsistence. If that same point were found alone on the surface, its story would be incomplete and open to wild speculation. Archaeology painstakingly documents these relationships, building a web of evidence that supports a single, logical narrative. The second pillar is the robust dating we discussed earlier. Multiple, independent scientific techniques converging on the same time frame create a chronological anchor that is extremely difficult to credibly dispute. This precise dating places the site within the known flow of human technological and cultural development, not outside of it. The third, and perhaps most crucial pillar, is peer review. Before any major finding is accepted, it is subjected to intense scrutiny by other experts in the field. They examine the methods, question the interpretations, and demand to see the raw data. This process is not about tearing down ideas, but about strengthening them. It ensures that the story which emerges is the one most strongly supported by the evidence, having survived the toughest possible questions from skeptical colleagues. This evidence-based narrative does not diminish the wonder, it amplifies it, understanding that real people with the same cognitive capacity as you or I solved these extreme challenges through cooperation, observation, and cultural memory is a far more inspiring story. It connects us to them across the millennia. It means that the spark of ingenuity that lit their fat lamp is the same spark we carry today. By grounding ourselves in this rigorous, human-centered story, we prepare to ask the most important question of all, one that reaches beyond the ancient past and speaks directly to our present and our future. The silence of the site holds its secrets tightly, but modern science has learned how to listen. Uncovering the story of the polar pioneers requires more than just trowels and brushes. It demands a sophisticated toolkit that feels more like a mission to another planet than a traditional dig. At the forefront is ground-penetrating radar. Researchers slowly push a sled-mounted unit across the spongy tundra, sending harmless radio pulses deep into the frozen ground. As these pulses bounce off buried features, they paint a ghostly image on a screen, revealing the outlines of ancient hearths, storage pits, or even the subtle depressions of house floors hidden meters below the surface, all without ever breaking the ground. This allows the team to create a precise map of the underground landscape, targeting their excavations with surgical accuracy to minimize disturbance to this incredibly fragile permafrost environment. From above, the perspective shifts dramatically. Silent drones equipped with high-resolution cameras fly precise grid patterns over the site, capturing thousands of overlapping photographs. Specialized software then stitches these images together into an incredibly detailed three-dimensional map of the entire excavation area. This digital model becomes the permanent, interactive record of the site, allowing researchers to measure distances, examine soil layers, and revisit the exact context of every find long after the trenches have been carefully backfilled to protect the archaeology. When a rare artifact is finally exposed, the documentation process is equally meticulous. Using a technique called photogrammetry, archaeologists take a series of photographs from every conceivable angle around the object as it lies in the ground. These photos are processed to create a photorealistic three-dimensional model, capturing the tool's exact shape, its position relative to other finds, and even the texture of the surrounding soil. This virtual artifact can then be shared with experts across the globe for analysis, while the original remains safely in its context until the last possible moment. Perhaps most surprising is the rise of the portable field lab. Gone are the days when every sample had to be shipped to a distant university, risking degradation or loss. Now, compact devices can perform preliminary analysis right at the edge of the excavation. A handheld X-ray fluorescence scanner can be held over a stone tool to instantly determine its elemental composition, hinting at the distant quarry it came from. Small, insulated cases preserve delicate organic samples at stable temperatures until they can be transported to advanced facilities. This marriage of high-tech precision with raw Arctic adventure defines modern archaeology. It is a discipline that respects the irreplaceable nature of the record by gathering maximum data with minimum intrusion, ensuring that every whisper from the past is heard clearly. The same permafrost that guarded their secrets for millennia is now betraying them. Our warming climate presents a profound and urgent paradox, one that ties the fate of these ancient stories directly to our modern world. The relentless thaw of the Arctic, driven by human activity, is the very reason sites like this are emerging from the ice after 30,000 years. Yet this same process now threatens to erase them forever, creating a desperate race against time for archaeologists. It is a cruel irony. The mechanism of discovery is also the engine of destruction. As the frozen ground softens and melts, structures painstakingly built from mammoth bone become unstable and collapse. Organic treasures like wooden tools, fragments of clothing, or even strands of hair, which were preserved in a state of suspended animation, are suddenly exposed to oxygen, moisture, and microbes. They can rot away in a matter of months, turning to black sludge before they can ever be documented. This isn't a distant threat. It is happening right now across the circumpolar world. Each summer thaw penetrates deeper. Each warm season lasts longer, unlocking vaults of history only to consign their contents to oblivion. In response, a new kind of science has emerged, often called rescue or salvage archaeology. The goal is no longer a multi-decade, leisurely excavation. It is a rapid response operation. Teams must mobilize at a moment's notice, often working in brief, intense campaigns during the short field season. Their mission is triage, to extract the maximum amount of information in the minimum amount of time before the site is lost. They use every tool we discussed, from ground-penetrating radar to drone mapping, not for pure research luxury, but for survival, to digitally preserve what they cannot physically save. This work is emotionally and logistically grueling. Archaeologists speak of the heartbreak of arriving at a location reported just a year earlier, only to find a muddy slump where a fragile artifact once lay, or a stream now cutting through a midden that held millennia of dietary records. They are chroniclers of a vanishing world, racing to read the pages of a book that is burning. This urgency transforms our understanding of the past from an academic pursuit into a shared human responsibility. These sites are not just curiosities, they are non-renewable archives of human resilience, unique experiments in how societies adapt to extreme change. Their lessons are acutely relevant today, as we face our own era of climatic disruption. The strategies, the failures, and the sheer endurance of these ancient communities offer a deep time perspective on sustainability and survival. Every tool fragment saved, every house plan recorded, is a piece of that puzzle. The race in the thawing north is about more than recovering artifacts. It is about reclaiming wisdom from the ice before it melts into silence, ensuring that the story of those first polar pioneers does not end with their final disappearance a second time. A single stone tool is a whisper, but to hear the full story, you need a chorus of voices. Unraveling a mystery buried for 30,000 years is no longer the work of a lone archaeologist in a trench. It is a grand, interdisciplinary conversation, a meeting of many minds where each scientist brings a different language to read the same ancient text. Climatologists enter the dialogue with their vast models drawn from ice cores and ocean sediments. They do not study artifacts but atmospheres. Their contribution is to paint the backdrop, to tell us whether the world our pioneers inhabited was in a phase of fleeting warmth or enduring deep freeze, providing the essential environmental stage for the human drama. Geologists and soil scientists then examine the very ground that held the artifacts. They analyze sediment layers, mineral compositions, and permafrost structures to reconstruct the ancient landscape. Was this ridge once a windy bluff overlooking a river valley? Was the soil stable or eroding? Their work turns a two-dimensional site map into a three-dimensional world, revealing why this specific location was chosen from all others. The silent partners in this investigation are often the palynologists, the scientists who study ancient pollen. They take tiny cores from nearby lake beds or examine soil samples from the hearth itself, searching for microscopic grains preserved through the ages. Each type of pollen is a signature from a specific plant. Finding an abundance of grass pollen versus only hardy shrub pollen can mark the difference between a productive summer grazing ground and a barren stretch of tundra, offering a direct snapshot of the local environment in exquisite detail. Meanwhile, the archaeologists, the bone detectives, scrutinize every fragment of faunal remains. Their expertise identifies not just what was eaten, but how it was hunted and processed. Cut marks on a caribou bone can reveal the butchering technique, while the age profile of the animals found, many young or very old, might suggest a hunting strategy targeting vulnerable members of a herd. They reconstruct the diet, the season of occupation, and the economic pressures the community faced. Finally, geneticists add the most intimate layer, probing the degraded DNA from bone or sediment for clues about the people themselves and the animals they relied on. They ask questions about ancestry, population movements, and even the genetic health of the prey species. This holistic approach is the true engine of modern discovery. It means the charcoal from a hearth is not just dated, it is analyzed for burnt seeds. A stone point is not just catalogued, its sourcing is traced to a quarry 200 miles away. The soil around a post hole is sifted for insect casings that indicate a warmer microclimate. Each specialist provides a single piece of the puzzle, and only when they lay their pieces together does the full, breathtaking image begin to emerge. The story of the polar site is no longer just an archaeological report. It is a paleoscientific symphony, proving that the deepest mysteries of the human past are solved not in isolation, but in collaboration. This pattern of resilience against the odds is not unique to the frozen north. Across the globe and throughout time, human societies have repeatedly performed a similar kind of magic, turning apparent wastelands into cradles of culture. Consider the great cities of the Indus Valley, like Mohenjo-Daro, which rose to astonishing sophistication in a landscape defined by unpredictable rivers and arid seasons. Their genius was not in fighting the environment, but in designing a dialogue with it. They built elaborate, city-wide water management systems with wells, baths, and covered drains, demonstrating an innovation born from necessity to secure a life-giving resource. On the opposite side of the world, the people of Rapa Nui, Easter Island, represent a masterclass in isolated adaptation. Arriving on one of the most remote islands on Earth, they developed a unique and sustainable agricultural system using volcanic rock gardens to protect crops from wind and conserve moisture, fostering a complex society in breathtaking isolation. When we place the polar pioneers beside these other societies, a powerful set of common traits emerges, a universal toolkit for survival in marginal worlds. The first is targeted innovation. This is not invention for its own sake, but a precise, problem-solving creativity. For the Arctic, it was the bone needle and the fat lamp. For the Indus, it was the brick-lined well. For Rapa Nui, it was the stone garden. Each solution was elegantly tailored to a specific existential challenge. The second trait is profound social cooperation. Building a city's drainage network, moving the monumental Moai statues, or organizing a mammoth hunt, all required a level of coordination that transcends individual effort. These achievements were possible only through shared purpose, intricate social organization, and likely a cultural value placed on collective well-being over individual gain. The third, and perhaps most crucial, is flexible subsistence. Reliance on a single resource is a recipe for fragility. Successful marginal societies diversify. Polar communities combined coastal sealing with inland caribou hunting and seasonal foraging. The Indus farmers likely supplemented their crops with managed herding and trade. The Rapa Nui Islanders harvested from the sea while nurturing their engineered gardens. This diversification created a safety net, allowing them to absorb shocks when one part of their economy faltered. Framing the polar story within this broader tapestry does not diminish its wonder, it elevates it. It shows that the drive to adapt, to cooperate, and to innovate in the face of daunting constraints is a fundamental thread in the human story. Our ancestors were not passive victims of their geography. They were active participants, constantly testing and expanding the boundaries of the possible. This perspective invites a humbling and inspiring realization. The same creative spirit that lit a lamp in an Arctic house, that channeled water in a desert city, and that grew food on a windswept island still resides within us. It is our shared inheritance, a deep well of resilience we have drawn upon time and again. The stones hold one kind of memory, but the people hold another. While the material evidence from sites like Sung here offers a tangible record, another profound archive exists within the living traditions of the Arctic's indigenous peoples. Their oral histories, passed down through countless generations, are not history books in the Western sense, but they are deep-time narratives, repositories of cultural wisdom and collective experience. Exploring whether echoes of that ancient occupation resonate in these stories requires both deep respect and intellectual humility. A direct, unbroken line from a 30,000-year-old campsite to a specific legend told today is incredibly unlikely, given the vast chasms of time and the profound cultural transformations that have occurred. Yet, when we listen to the themes woven through these narratives, we find a complementary layer of understanding, a spiritual and emotional map of the Arctic human experience that beautifully parallels the archaeological one. Many Arctic indigenous traditions speak of a time of origins, of the first people who emerged or arrived in the land. The Yupik and Inupiat peoples of Alaska and Siberia, for instance, have rich creation stories that describe how the world was shaped and how humans learned to live within it. These narratives often feature a period of great movement and adaptation, where ancestral figures undertook epic journeys, encountering and overcoming the immense challenges of the frozen world. They tell of learning to hunt the whale, to build the snow house, to sew garments that defied the cold. These are not chronicles of dates and places, but of foundational lessons in resilience. They encode the same core truth revealed by the archaeology. Survival here was not accidental, but a hard-won education passed from one generation to the next. Another powerful recurring theme is that of the other or earlier people. In various traditions across the circumpolar north, there are references to a people who came before, who lived in the land in ancient times. The Tuniat or Sivalurmiat of Inuit legend are often described as a strong, earlier people who were giants or who possessed different customs, and who ultimately faded away or were absorbed. Scholars carefully note that these stories are complex and not literal historical accounts, but they may preserve a cultural memory of encountering other groups in the deep past, or of a time when the population and circumstances of the Arctic were profoundly different. They speak to a long human presence in the region, a layering of stories upon the land that acknowledges a past beyond immediate memory. Perhaps the most striking parallel lies in the worldview these traditions embody, a worldview that the archaeological evidence implies the ancient pioneers must have shared. It is a perspective of profound reciprocity with the environment. In many Arctic indigenous belief systems, animals are seen as conscious beings who give themselves to the hunter out of respect. Rituals of thanks and prescribed ways of treating bones honor this relationship. This is not mere superstition. It is a sophisticated ecological philosophy that ensures sustainable practice and reinforces the interconnectedness of all life. When we look at the archaeological record, at the careful use of every part of the animal, from meat to bone to hide, we see the practical manifestation of this same principle. Their survival depended on a deep, observant partnership with the natural world, a partnership that oral traditions have kept alive as an ethical and spiritual guide. It is crucial to approach this connection not as a puzzle to be solved, where a myth must match an excavation layer, but as two different ways of knowing the same profound story. The archaeological site gives us the what and the when, the physical blueprint of survival. the oral traditions offer insight into the how and the why, the cultural spirit that animated those blueprints. They remind us that those ancient pioneers were not just problem solvers, they were storytellers, parents, and teachers. They wondered about their place in the cosmos, celebrated their successes, and mourned their losses. Their legacy, therefore, is twofold, etched both in the permafrost and in the enduring narrative wisdom of the peoples who still call the Arctic home. This layered understanding of science and story prepares us to ask the final, most forward-looking question of all. What does this ancient tale of adaptation on the edge of the world have to say to us today as we face a climatic future of our own making? The ground beneath their feet tells a story not of ice but of life. To understand the world they inhabited, we must reconstruct the lost landscape from clues locked in the soil itself. This is the work of paleoecology, a science that reads the ancient environment like a forgotten book. Pollen grains, preserved by the thousands in lake sediments near the site, offer the most intimate portrait. These microscopic time capsules reveal an Arctic that was starkly different from the barren tundra of today. The dominant signal is not from trees, but from a mosaic of hardy, low-growing plants that formed a rich ground cover. Dwarf birch and willow shrubs, perhaps only knee-high, would have dotted the landscape, their flexible branches and dense leaves providing crucial windbreaks and forage. Between them stretched vast meadows of grasses and sedges, rippling in the brief summer wind, along with bursts of color from flowering herbs like Arctic poppy and saxifrage. This was not a lush forest, but a productive and diverse grassland, a steppe tundra ecosystem that transformed the region into a seasonal paradise for large herbivores. This verdant carpet supported an astonishing array of animal life, a menagerie now largely vanished from the earth. Towering above all were the woolly mammoths, their shaggy coats and long tusks a defining feature of the horizon. Mixed among them grazed herds of woolly rhinoceros, massive bison with great curved horns, and horses adapted to the cold. Reindeer and caribou would have migrated through in vast numbers, their movements dictating the seasonal rhythms of the human hunters who depended on them. This was also the realm of formidable predators like the cave lion and the scimitar cat, competitors and potential threats that shaped the daily calculus of survival. The presence of these species, many of which are now extinct, is confirmed by more than just imagination. Their bones are found in the same geological layers as the human artifacts. Even the DNA of these ancient grasses and animals can sometimes be recovered from the permafrost, providing a genetic snapshot of the ecosystem. This detailed reconstruction fundamentally changes how we see the site. It transforms it from a lonely, windswept ridge into a vibrant hub within a living, breathing biome. The people were not clinging to existence in a wasteland. They were strategically positioned within a corridor of abundance. Their hilltop might have offered a panoramic view for spotting game herds moving across the grassy plains below. A nearby river, now dry or shrunken, could have been a lifeline, attracting animals to drink and providing fish, waterfowl, and a clear travel route. This context makes their achievement not a superhuman struggle against impossible odds, but a brilliant example of human adaptation to a specific, if challenging, opportunity. They recognized the potential of this greener Arctic and built their lives within its fleeting bounty, seeing the landscape through their eyes as a place of grass, game, and seasonal plenty, finally allows us to grasp the practical reality of their home, making their story not one of mythic endurance but of intelligent, grounded choice. Their world was one of grass and giants, but were they truly alone in it? The artifacts from the hearth tell a story of daily life, but a handful of other objects whisper of horizons far beyond the frozen ridge. To understand whether this community lived in profound isolation or was part of a wider world, we must become detectives of distance, tracing the hidden journeys of stone and idea. The most direct evidence comes from the raw materials themselves. When researchers analyze the stone used for tools, they sometimes find a startling mismatch. A beautifully crafted blade might be made from a type of flint or obsidian that does not exist anywhere in the local geology. Using techniques like geochemical sourcing, scientists can match the unique fingerprint of that stone to a specific quarry, a place that might lie 200, 500, even 1,000 kilometers away. Finding such an exotic material in the far north presents two thrilling possibilities. The first is long-distance travel, a direct expedition by members of the community to that distant source. This would imply an astonishing knowledge of geography, an ability to navigate across vast and varied terrain, and a social organization capable of supporting such an ambitious journey. The second possibility is trade, a chain of hand-to-hand exchanges that move the prized material across the continent like a slow-moving rumor. In this scenario, the blade might have passed through many groups, each adding to its story, before finally reaching the hands of a polar hunter. Both scenarios shatter the image of a hermetically sealed society. They paint a picture of a permeable Arctic where knowledge, goods, and perhaps even people moved along invisible pathways. This evidence of connection is not limited to stone. A single bead made from a seashell found only on a distant coast, or a pendant fashioned from a rare type of amber, carries the same profound message. These were not utilitarian items, they were valuables. Their presence suggests these communities participated in networks of social exchange, where such objects cemented alliances, marked important life events, or conveyed status. To possess a blade of far southern flint was to hold a map of your relationships in your hand. Yet the story is nuanced. The sheer scarcity of these exotic items is itself a crucial clue. For every 100 tools made from local river cobbles, there might be one fashioned from a distant stone. This ratio suggests that while contact existed, it was likely intermittent, perhaps seasonal, and never the lifeblood of the community. They were overwhelmingly self-sufficient, masters of their immediate environment. The long-distance connections were the thin, strong threads of a safety net, or the rare luxury goods that added richness to a life already complete. This balance between isolation and interaction defines their unique position. They possess the skills to survive entirely on their own, a testament to unparalleled adaptation. Yet, they were also connected enough to know they were not alone in the world, that beyond the mountains and rivers were other people, other ways. This delicate state speaks to a profound truth about human societies, even in the most remote corners of the earth. We are driven both to build a secure home and to know what lies beyond its borders. The smallest hands left the faintest marks, but their presence is perhaps the most humanizing clue of all. Among the stone blades and hearth ashes, archaeologists sometimes uncover objects that stop the narrative cold. A tiny, crudely shaped animal figurine carved from soapstone, or a miniature spear point, perfectly scaled but clearly not meant for a serious hunt. These are the echoes of childhood in the Ice Age, silent testaments to a community built not just of hunters and gatherers, but of families. The lives of children in this polar world would have been a unique blend of profound vulnerability and early, essential responsibility. From their first breaths, they entered a world of exacting demands. The challenges surrounding childbirth and early infancy in such an environment are almost unimaginable to us today. The cold was a constant, relentless threat to a newborn unable to regulate its own temperature. Ensuring a stable, warm microclimate within the dwelling, likely near the central hearth, would have been a communal priority, with knowledge of infant care passed from experienced mothers and elders to new parents. The high nutritional needs of both mother and baby required a secure and consistent food supply, placing the entire family's well-being at the heart of the group's economic success. Survival rates were undoubtedly shaped by these immense pressures, making every child who thrived a precious victory for the entire community. Yet, childhood here was far from a period of sheltered idleness. As soon as a toddler could walk, their education in survival began through imitation and play. That miniature spear point was likely not a toy in our modern sense, but a practice tool. A child might use it to hunt a stuffed leather target, learning the grip, the stance, and the throwing motion under the watchful eye of a parent or older sibling. A little girl might sit beside her mother, using a blunt bone fragment to mimic the scraping of a hide, her small hands building the muscle memory for a task that would one day clothe her family. Games themselves were training. A version of tag might develop agility and stamina, skills vital for tracking game or evading danger. Storytelling around the evening fire did more than pass the time. It embedded crucial knowledge, the migration patterns of caribou, the signs of a coming storm, the mythical origins of their people, and the respectful rituals for the animals they hunted. Children were the living vessels for this irreplaceable cultural database. Their ability to learn, remember, and later innovate upon these skills was the single greatest investment the community could make in its own future. Their playful shouts around the dwellings, the careful shaping of a first clumsy tool, the wide-eyed listening to an elder's tale, these moments transform the archaeological site from a seasonal camp into a true home. It reminds us with poignant clarity that every technological innovation, every hunting strategy, every stitch of clothing was ultimately for them, for the promise carried in the next generation, who would one day lift the full weight of their world. The story does not end with the artifacts we have already found. For every site like Sung here that emerges from the Thaw, there are countless others still hidden, their stories locked away beneath ice and ocean. The greatest chapters of this polar saga may still be waiting to be read, lying along coastlines that have not seen the sun for 15,000 years. During the last glacial maximum, when so much of the world's water was locked in ice, sea levels were over 100 meters lower than they are today. Vast stretches of continental shelf now submerged under the Arctic Ocean were once dry, grassy plains, a lost continent we call Beringia. This was not a barren bridge, but a thriving, habitable landscape, likely dotted with the camps and villages of the very people who first ventured eastward. These sites now rest on the ocean floor, preserved in the cold, dark silence of the deep, potentially holding the most complete record of that epic migration we could ever hope to find. Beyond these sunken plains, the intact ice caps of Greenland and the Canadian Arctic archipelago guard their own secrets. Permanent ice sheets are not just frozen water, they are time capsules, accumulating layers that can trap and preserve anything on the landscape beneath them. As these sheets slowly flow and shift, they might scrape over and encase ancient settlements, freezing them in a clear, icy tomb. The potential for discovery here is staggering, a possibility of finding a moment in time perfectly preserved, a snapshot of a polar home exactly as it was left. Unlocking these hidden archives will require a new generation of explorers armed with tools that seem borrowed from science fiction. Satellite technology is already revolutionizing the search. Advanced imaging from space can detect subtle changes in the Earth's surface, identifying patterns in vegetation or ground moisture that might signal an archaeological feature beneath. Synthetic aperture radar can peer through cloud cover and even penetrate dry surface layers to map the topography of buried landscapes, guiding ground teams with unprecedented precision. In the lab, the revolution is molecular. The field of proteomics allows scientists to analyze ancient proteins, which are far more durable than DNA, recovered from stone tools or soil samples. A single scraping tool might still carry traces of the specific animal it last processed, telling us not just that they hunted, but exactly what they were eating on a given day. Similarly, lipid analysis can identify the residues of ancient fats and oils left in the pores of pottery or on hearthstones, revealing details of diet and food preparation invisible to the naked eye. Perhaps the most profound future lies in the integration of artificial intelligence. Machine learning algorithms can be trained to scan vast datasets, from satellite imagery to geological surveys, flagging anomalies that human eyes might miss. They can model ancient climates at hyperlocal scales, predicting where those crucial micro-refugia might have been, and therefore where we should look. This is not about replacing the archaeologist, but about giving them a powerful new lens to see the past. The narrative of the human journey is still being written, with every technological advance adding new sentences, new characters, new plot twists. The frozen north, long considered a blank space on the map of prehistory, is now understood to be a central stage. The next great discovery might be a submerged village on the floor of the Chukchi Sea, or a ceremonial site perfectly preserved under the Greenland ice. Each holds the promise to refine our story, to introduce us to a people whose names we will never know, but whose legacy of resilience continues to speak across the ages. A discovery is not a possession, but a profound responsibility. The act of uncovering these ancient lives carries with it an ethical weight as heavy as the permafrost itself, demanding that we ask not just what we can learn, but how we should proceed with respect. Modern Arctic archaeology is guided by a foundational principle that the work is done with and for the communities whose ancestral lands hold these stories. This begins long before the first shovel touches the ground, with extensive consultation and collaboration with local indigenous groups. Elders and knowledge holders are not merely informed, they are essential partners, their perspectives shaping research questions, guiding fieldwork protocols, and interpreting findings through a cultural lens that science alone cannot provide. This partnership ensures the work honors living traditions and serves the interests of the descendants, transforming an external excavation into a shared endeavor of reclamation and understanding. Central to this ethical framework is the principle of minimal disturbance. The goal is no longer to extract everything, but to learn as much as possible while leaving the site as intact as possible for future generations and technologies. Archaeologists might excavate only a small, carefully chosen percentage of a site, using non-invasive tools like ground-penetrating radar to map the rest. When they do dig, they work with the precision of surgeons, documenting every grain of soil and the exact position of every fragment. The focus shifts from collecting artifacts to collecting information, creating such detailed digital records that the virtual site can be studied indefinitely, while the physical one remains quietly in the earth. This stewardship extends to the most sensitive of discoveries. Protocols for encountering human remains or objects of deep spiritual significance are established with indigenous partners from the outset. The prevailing ethical practice prioritizes in situ preservation, leaving such materials undisturbed in their resting place whenever possible. If study is deemed necessary by all parties, it is conducted with the utmost reverence, and repatriation, the return of these ancestors and their belongings to their descendant communities, is the unequivocal end goal. This process acknowledges that these are not merely specimens but people with living cultural connections that transcend academic curiosity. This ethical approach fundamentally reframes the narrative. It means the story of the polar pioneers is not extracted but co-authored. It ensures that the voice of the past is not heard through the filter of an outsider's interpretation alone, but is amplified by the wisdom of the cultures that have persisted in that landscape. The frozen past is not a trophy to be claimed, but a legacy to be guarded, a shared human heritage whose true value is realized only when exploration is inseparable from respect. There is a profound human need to understand those who walk the edge of survival. This mystery of the polar pioneers captivates us not merely as an archaeological puzzle, but as a mirror reflecting our deepest anxieties and highest aspirations. At its core, it is a story of endurance that speaks directly to something ancient within us. In a modern world often defined by comfort and convenience, we are drawn to narratives of extreme hardship overcome, to the proof that our species is capable of more than we ever assume. The image of a family huddled in a bone house against the endless night, their single lamp pushing back the dark, is a powerful symbol of resilience that transcends time. It reassures us of a fundamental human toughness, a capacity to persevere that feels both ancestral and urgently relevant. This taps directly into the romance of exploration, the allure of the blank space on the map. Even today, when satellites have charted every coastline, we are fascinated by those who first ventured into the literal unknown, who looked at a glacier and wondered what lay beyond it. Their journey satisfies our innate curiosity and our admiration for pure courage, for setting out toward a horizon with no guarantee of return. We see in them the ultimate pioneers, and their story becomes a foundational myth for our own restless spirit. Equally compelling is the intellectual satisfaction of the puzzle itself. The human mind is wired to solve problems, to connect disparate clues into a coherent story. The site presents us with a magnificent riddle, a set of physical clues, charcoal, stones, bones, that contradict our established models of climate and human capability. Unraveling it engages the same detective instinct that draws us to mystery novels or complex documentaries. Each new scientific technique, from DNA analysis to soil chemistry, feels like another tool cracking the code, allowing us to participate vicariously in the great detective story of our own past. This fascination is amplified by our contemporary context, particularly our growing collective anxiety about a changing climate. Their story is no longer a distant, frozen artifact. It is a case study in human adaptation to environmental upheaval. We watch the permafrost thaw and reveal their world, even as that same thaw threatens our future. This creates a powerful, sobering resonance. We look to them not for solutions, but for perspective, to understand how a society negotiates a shifting world, to see what endures when the environment itself becomes unpredictable. This blend of endurance, mystery, and relevance explains why such themes dominate our popular culture. From blockbuster films about survival against the elements to best-selling novels that imagine lost civilizations in icy wastes, we are continually retelling this story. Literature from Jack London's brutal northern tales to more recent speculative fiction explores the thin line between human and nature, between civilization and its fragile underpinnings. Television documentaries that follow archaeologists into extreme environments thrive because they marry adventure with discovery, letting us feel the chill wind and share the thrill of a find. These narratives are popular because they are safe rehearsals for our deepest fears and highest hopes. They allow us to experience the edge of existence from the comfort of our homes, to wonder what we would do in that same circumstance. Ultimately, the public's deep engagement with this polar mystery shows that history is never just about the past. It becomes a way for us to interrogate our present and ponder our future. When we feel a chill of awe hearing of their 30,000-year-old hearth, we are not just learning about them, we are quietly measuring the strength of our own flame. The story of that frozen ridge is now safeguarded by a name and a promise. The Sung Here site, along with other key locations in the region, is recognized by the Russian government as a protected archaeological monument of federal significance. This legal designation is not just a formality, it is a shield. It places the land under strict oversight, making any unauthorized excavation, construction, or removal of artifacts a serious legal offense. This status is crucial in a remote area, acting as a first line of defense against the most immediate human threat, looting. The global market for antiquities can turn a single carved ivory pendant into a tempting target, and legal protection empowers local authorities to monitor and intervene. While Sung Here itself is not yet on the UNESCO World Heritage List, its profound significance makes it a strong candidate for future nomination. The process for such a listing is rigorous, requiring a demonstration of outstanding universal value, that this place holds meaning for all of humanity, not just a single nation. Achieving this status would bring heightened international attention and cooperation, potentially unlocking additional resources and expertise for its long-term stewardship. Protection, however, extends beyond laws on paper. On the ground, the strategy is one of managed access and minimal intrusion. There are no visitor centers or marked trails leading to the sensitive excavation areas. Research is conducted under strict permits, with teams obligated to carefully backfill their trenches after documentation to stabilize the permafrost and leave the landscape visually undisturbed. This practice, called preservation in situ, prioritizes leaving the archaeological record safely in the ground whenever possible, trusting that future technologies will allow even more detailed study with less disturbance. The greatest and most complex challenge comes from the environment itself. The same Thaw that revealed the site is now its most relentless enemy. To combat this, scientists are employing innovative conservation techniques. In some areas, they may use insulating blankets of geotextile fabric and layers of sod to rebury exposed features, artificially regulating the ground temperature to slow the melt. Monitoring stations are set up to track permafrost depth, soil temperature, and erosion rates year-round, creating an early warning system for accelerated decay. Every decision is weighed against a central ethical question: how do we balance our need to learn with our duty to preserve? The answer increasingly leans toward digital immortality. Through photogrammetry and laser scanning, every artifact, every soil layer, every hearth is captured in meticulous three-dimensional detail before any physical intervention. These digital twins become the primary objects of study for researchers worldwide, while the originals remain in their context or in climate-controlled storage. This approach acknowledges that the site's true value is not in the objects alone, but in the information they hold about human resilience. Protecting Sung here is an act of faith in the future. It declares that this window into an unexpected past must be kept open, not just for the next generation of archaeologists, but for all generations to come, ensuring that the whispers from the ice continue to be heard. The scattered stones and charcoal stains do not speak for themselves. They are fragments of a sentence from a lost language, and the archaeologist's true craft lies not in excavation, but in translation. This final, interpretive leap transforms a catalogue of objects into a living narrative, a story of the polar pioneers. It is a process built on a foundation of meticulous evidence, but it requires something more: the careful, creative work of informed speculation. An archaeologist holds a stone blade, its edge worn smooth from scraping hides. The physical analysis is clear: it is made of local chert, its microwear patterns confirm its use. But the story asks whose hands held it. Was it crafted by a young hunter learning his trade under the watchful eye of a patient elder? Or was it the trusted tool of a mother, working quickly by the hearthlight to prepare a warm parka for her child before the winter storms arrived? The evidence does not provide these personal details, but the narrative must leave space for them, for the human reality they represent. This is where competing theories emerge, each a different lens on the same set of facts. One researcher might look at the site's location and argue it was primarily a winter base camp, strategically positioned for accessing marine resources when inland travel was difficult. Another, examining the same hearths and tool styles, might propose it was a summer aggregation site, a seasonal gathering place for several small family groups to socialize, trade, and arrange marriages. Both interpretations are valid, both are supported by elements of the evidence. Science does not rush to choose one and discard the other. Instead, it holds both possibilities in tension, allowing new data to gradually tip the scale. This dynamic, sometimes contentious conversation is the engine of understanding. It ensures that no single story hardens into dogma. The narrative of Sung here is not a finished book. It is a draft that is constantly being revised. A new technique for analyzing ancient proteins might one day reveal the exact species of animal fat burned in a lamp, shifting our view of their seasonal economy. A fresh core from a nearby lake could refine the climate record, showing a brief, local warm phase we had previously missed. Each discovery is a new paragraph, a corrected sentence, sometimes a whole new chapter. To embrace this is to see science not as a collection of settled facts, but as the most profound form of storytelling, a collective, self-correcting journey toward a truth we may never fully hold, but will never stop trying to honor. The final meaning of those silent hearths lies not in the certainty we impose, but in the respectful curiosity we continue to bring. The stones tell a human story, but the soil holds a planetary one. This discovery does more than rewrite a chapter of human history. It forces a fundamental re-examination of the ancient climate itself. For decades, our models of Earth's deep past have been built on broad, sweeping data, the grand averages pulled from ice cores and ocean sediments that sketch the planet's overall health. The undeniable human presence at Sung here during a time those models label as intensely cold creates a direct and uncomfortable challenge. It suggests our global reconstructions may be missing crucial fine print, the short-term variability and local exceptions that made all the difference for life on the ground. Think of it like a weather forecast for an entire continent. It might correctly predict a cold front, but it cannot account for the sheltered valley that stays surprisingly mild, or the coastal strip warmed by a peculiar current. The people at Sung here were likely living in one of those valleys, a microclimate refuge too small to register in the planetary data, but large enough to sustain a community. This possibility compels climatologists to ask new questions. Were these warm anomalies more frequent than we thought? Did they last longer? Our models, designed to track millennia-long trends, might be smoothing over these vital blips of opportunity, these climatic wrinkles that offered a temporary haven. Refining these models is not just an academic exercise, it is essential for painting an accurate portrait of Earth's dynamic past. More importantly, understanding these ancient anomalies provides a powerful, long-term test for the computer simulations we use to project future climate change. If our current models struggle to explain the past evidence from Sung here, how confident can we be in their predictions for the next century? This polar site becomes a benchmark, a real-world data point from 30,000 years ago that our virtual climate models must now account for. Getting the past right is the only way to truly trust our vision of the future. By studying how the climate flickered and allowed life to persist in seemingly impossible places, scientists can stress-test their projections, improving their ability to forecast not just global averages, but regional impacts and potential refuges. This elevates the narrative from a fascinating historical mystery to a vital contribution to the most pressing scientific debate of our time, proving that the deepest ice can sometimes hold the clearest lens for seeing ahead. That single, remote ridge now demands a quiet revolution in every classroom where human origins are taught. For generations, the standard narrative has followed a clear, almost inevitable path. A story of humanity cautiously emerging from Africa, slowly adapting to temperate forests and grasslands, and only much later, as a final act of daring, confronting the icy frontiers of the North. This discovery shatters that linear timeline, inserting a bold, unexpected chapter much earlier in the story. Textbooks that once relegated the peopling of the Arctic to a brief footnote in the last 10,000 years must now expand that section into a full exploration of resilience spanning 30 millennia. The map of prehistoric migration needs redrawing, with new, tentative arrows branching northward during ancient warm phases. suggesting that the human journey was not a single, directed march, but a series of adaptive pulses into every conceivable niche. This changes how we understand human capability itself. No longer are these early peoples seen merely as reactive creatures fleeing hardship or following herds. They become proactive architects of their own destiny, possessing a technological and social genius that allowed them to intentionally colonize one of the planet's most demanding environments. This shift from a story of passive survival to one of active mastery is profound, transforming our ancestors from background figures into the central protagonists of an epic saga of adaptation. The implications ripple outward into related fields. Anthropology courses discussing human-climate interaction must now incorporate this case study, showing that the relationship is far more complex and nuanced than simple cause and effect. Biology classes examining evolution and adaptation can point to this as a stunning example of cultural evolution outpacing biological change, where innovation in toolmaking and social organization allowed humans to occupy a biome without needing to physically evolve new traits first. Even ethics and philosophy discussions about humanity's place in the natural world gain a powerful new reference point, a deep-time example of a sustainable, reciprocal relationship with a fragile ecosystem. Integrating these paradigm-shifting discoveries into education is not about adding one more fact to memorize. It is about cultivating a vital mindset. It teaches students that history is not a settled record, but a living dialogue between the past and the present. It shows that a single discovery in a distant field can overturn long-held assumptions, demonstrating the dynamic, self-correcting nature of science itself. Most importantly, it inspires, learning that people their age with the same fundamental intelligence solved problems of such monumental scale can ignite a powerful sense of possibility. A student who might glaze over at a list of kings and dates might sit up straighter hearing about the family who built a home of mammoth bones against the Arctic night. That spark of wonder is the seed for the next generation of archaeologists, climatologists, and historians, who will look at the remaining blank spaces on our maps, both geographical and intellectual, and ask the next great questions. The true educational impact lies not in rewriting a single chapter, but in teaching every student that the book of the human story is still being written, and they too can hold the pen. Their story is not a relic of the past, but a living monument to our shared human character. This polar site, with its silent hearths and scattered tools, ultimately stands as a testament to something far greater than archaeology. It is a powerful declaration of human ingenuity, flexibility, and the relentless drive to explore. The true takeaway from this decades-long investigation is not a revised date on a timeline, but a profound insight into our species' core nature. Our history is not a straight, predestined line from simplicity to complexity. It is a complex, beautiful web of expansions and contractions, of bold pulses into new frontiers and strategic retreats, all woven in delicate response to a dynamic and ever-changing planet. These pioneers did not wait for the world to become perfect for them. They used their minds and their community to make a world possible. They looked at the freezing wind and saw not a stop sign, but a challenge to engineer a better shelter. They saw the retreating ice not as a loss, but as a corridor to a new home. This adaptive genius, this refusal to be defined by circumstance, is the deepest legacy they left in the frozen ground. Their resilience is not measured in centuries of occupation, but in the very fact of their presence, a proof that the human spirit can find a way in places the map says are blank. This understanding reframes our entire journey. It means that every time we encounter a gap in the archaeological record, it may not be an absence of people, but a story we have not yet learned how to read. It means our ancestors were not passive passengers on Earth, but active navigators, constantly testing the limits of the possible. The polar pioneers teach us that survival is not about brute force, but about creative partnership with each other and with the environment. Their legacy is not a list of artifacts, but an enduring echo of a fundamental truth, that to be human is to adapt, to explore, and to persistently make a home, even at the very edge of the world. Their story is a testament to human resilience, but it does not end with the archaeologists' report. This narrative, and others like it, are not closed books on a shelf. They are living conversations, and you have a voice in that conversation. The journey from a frozen ridge to our collective understanding is no longer the sole domain of specialists in remote field camps. Today, the bridge between discovery and public awareness is shorter than ever, and you can help build it. This is where the powerful idea of citizen science enters the story. Imagine a researcher with thousands of satellite images of the Arctic coastline, searching for subtle patterns that might indicate an ancient site. No single person could analyze them all, but through online platforms hosted by universities and museums, you can contribute. Projects exist where volunteers from around the world are trained to scan these images, flagging unusual shapes or discolorations for experts to investigate further. Your careful observation from your own home could literally help pinpoint the next great discovery, turning global curiosity into a tangible force for exploration. Beyond direct participation, your role as an informed advocate is equally vital. The preservation of these irreplaceable sites depends on public will and understanding. You can follow the work of reputable institutions like the Smithsonian, your National Geographic Society, or major university archaeology departments through their websites and social media channels. By engaging with their content, sharing their findings, and supporting them through memberships or donations, you help ensure they have the resources to continue this essential work, whether it's funding a new field season or conserving a fragile artifact. Your awareness also extends to the galleries of your local natural history or cultural museum. These spaces are not just displays, they are portals. When you walk through an exhibit on ancient climates or early human migration, you are voting with your presence for the importance of this knowledge. You are telling curators and directors that these stories matter, that connecting us to a deep past is a public good. This engagement naturally leads to the broader context of stewardship. The same climatic forces that revealed the Sung-Here site are now threatening countless others. Being an advocate for cultural heritage preservation is now inextricably linked to being an advocate for climate action. Informed citizens can support policies and organizations dedicated to protecting fragile environments and the historical records they hold. This isn't about political allegiance, it's about recognizing a fundamental truth. Our shared human heritage is a non-renewable resource, and its fate is tied to the health of our planet. Your role, therefore, transforms from passive viewer to active participant in a grand, ongoing story. You become a node in a network of curiosity and care that stretches from a researcher's tent on the tundra to a smartphone screen anywhere in the world. Every time you learn about a discovery and share that wonder, every time you choose to support science or visit a museum, you are adding a new layer to the legacy of those ancient pioneers. You are ensuring that their long silence is met not with indifference, but with a listening, global audience ready to learn from the echoes they left in the ice. The quiet embers of that ancient hearth still glow, not with heat but with meaning. Our journey into the frozen past leaves us with something far more valuable than a simple answer. It leaves us with a new and better set of questions. We have not closed a book but opened a door to a much larger room. This story is a profound reminder that history is not a locked vault but a living conversation. The ice and earth beneath our feet are not silent. They are archives still whispering secrets that can, at any moment, rewrite the chapters we thought we knew by heart. It forces us to see the ancient climate not as a painted backdrop on a stage, but as a dynamic, unpredictable character in the epic drama of human survival. one that offered both sanctuary and exile in a rhythm we are only beginning to understand. Let this discovery fill you with a sense of awe for the sheer capability of our ancestors, for the quiet genius in a bone needle, and the unbreakable bonds around a shared fire. But let it also inspire a moment of sober reflection. We now watch from a world where the climate is changing once more, not from natural cycles but from our own hands. The same permafrost that guarded these stories for millennia is now melting, revealing them even as it threatens to erase them forever. This creates a poignant responsibility to listen to these echoes from the ice not as curiosities, but as guides, as deep time lessons in resilience, adaptation, and the delicate balance of life on a shifting planet. If this exploration into humanity's forgotten frontiers has sparked your curiosity, consider subscribing for more journeys to the edges of our understanding. And we would truly love to hear from you. What do these polar pioneers and their impossible home mean to you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The greatest stories are never told by one voice alone. They are built in conversation. Our exploration may pause here, but the discovery and the discussion continues.